Now, a few years ago, the producers of the evergreen soap opera Coronation Street had a wedding to film. They chose a beautiful 14th century church in Cheshire for the ceremony. Just one problem: it had a cross right above the altar, and of course somebody might find the sight of a cross in a church offensive. So the producers hid the cross and carried on filming Molly and Tyrone's big day. Long gone are the days when only vampires feared the crucifix. In China, now home to a fast-growing Christian community, put at 100 million, they rip down crosses when they appear. But China is run by communists for whom religion is the opium of the people and therefore to be purged. What's our excuse? Well, it's a question at the heart of a case brought today against a London hospital that's being sued for discrimination against a Christian nurse who wore a cross at work. Mary Onuoha is 61 and has spent the last 19 years working for the NHS at Croydon Hospital. Mary claims she was treated like a criminal for wearing her small gold cross on a necklace, repeatedly asked to remove it, while colleagues of other faiths were allowed to wear religious symbols. This is far from being the first such case in Britain, and it may be that there are clinical reasons to do with infections and sterile areas that make NHS managers more nervous about a crucifix than, say, the hijab. But I don't think it's unreasonable to suggest that the NHS, an organisation which is undergoing a hiring frenzy of highly paid diversity officers, might be institutionally wary of the old religion, the one spread by colonial missionaries to places like Nigeria, where Mary hails from. Of course, what woke Britain, from the TV producers at Corrie to the taxpayer-funded NHS managers in Croydon, failed to realise is that they are not Britain's future. Mary is. If not Mary exactly, then people like her. Religious adherence in Britain is at a low point. For God-botherers like me, the speed with which we've dumped 1,500 years of Christianity can be shocking. I remember watching a film with a relative of mine in which the central character says the Lord's Prayer, words that every child learned by rote for centuries, and which may be just about the most important words ever written in English. It wasn't just that he didn't know the words, he hadn't heard of the prayer. He certainly would have had no idea of how Christians brought Britain universities and hospitals. As the historian Tom Holland says in his recent book Dominion, Westerners have forgotten what Christianity displaced and how much of our world depends on its revelations. But this religious illiteracy is a blip. Britain is increasingly populated by people of faith. Mary's birthplace, Nigeria, for instance, is currently home to 80 million Christians, and they are not Christians of the tepid sort. They are Christians of passionate intensity, Christians who will not suffer slights to their faith willingly. And as former Foreign Secretary William Hague wrote earlier this year, Nigerians will change the face of Britain. By 2050, when Africa's population will have tripled that of Europe's, Nigeria is predicted to be more populous than the United States. Mary will not be the last Christian Nigerian to make a home in Britain. Last week, the historian David Starkey told me here that Christianity in Britain had been supplanted by environmentalism, and you can see something of the religious martyr in those Insulate Britain protesters lying down in front of cars. But something else is coming down the road as England Africanises: the restoration of a muscular type of Christianity that will not tolerate what it sees as persecution at the hands of those who get cross about the cross. That's the Brazier angle. Well, let's turn to Roger Kiska from the Christian Legal Centre, who is representing Mary Onuoha. Roger, thanks so much indeed for your time. When do we get a result in this case?
Well, it should be. Hopefully, it won't be reserved, and we'll get it at the end of the trial, which will be very soon. We're hopeful on the evidence that we can prove discrimination. It is clear from the evidence we've provided that Mary was treated differently, that other religions were tolerated, that people were wearing lanyards, and secular jewellery was being worn in the theatre as well. So from our perspective, this is as clear-cut a case of discrimination as they come.
Important distinction to make. I mean, she was a theatre nurse, I mean, a really sterile area, obviously nervousness about infections, but you're saying she was singled out because of the cross on a necklace she wore around her neck, and other people were wearing bangles and hijabs, obviously. Well, there's less, you could argue, risk there, but people were wearing jewellery. Unequivocally, that was happening.
Yes, and in fact, there was one incident where Mary, during a procedure where a patient was under general anesthetic on the table, she was accosted in the theater, and the anesthesia, the doctor giving the anesthesia was wearing jewelry, was wearing bracelets that were open and uncovered. So there clearly is a distinction in how she was treated compared to others.
And you have no doubt in your mind that she was essentially persecuted for her Christian faith.
Well, it might not have been for her Christian faith, but it was certainly an intolerance towards the fact that it wasn't one of the recognized diversity religions or other beliefs. As the dress code policy says in the hospital, that they welcome, as part of diversity, other religions wearing their jewelry. Lanyards were worn, including rainbow lanyards. If you go to the NHS Croydon's site on Twitter, they post all sorts. There's a picture on the screen right now of the keys and the lanyards she was wearing in the theater. So it is an odd thing that this tiny little cross that she was wearing for 18 years without incident somehow became this issue that got her suspended and ultimately led to her dismissal.
Roger, I thought that the 2010 Equalities Act made sure that Christianity, all faiths, were protected characteristics.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And that's why this is a discrimination claim. And not just that, but as a public body, the hospital owes a public sector equality duty to foster good relations among religions. Tolerance is a two-way street, as is diversity. If you want to promote diversity, you have to do it with an equality of arms. And singling out the cross as the one no-go zone is troubling indeed.
Was there any sense, Roger, in which Mary was proselytising? I mean, might that have rubbed people up the wrong way if she was... Because we've seen this before, haven't we? People object to somebody praying for them, or, can I have just a quick word about, dot. Was Mary doing any of that?
Well, most of the patients were unconscious at the time if it was happening. But no, there's been no accusation that she was proselytizing. This is strictly regarding the cross.
Is it your suspicion, it's strongly mine, that the taxpayer-funded NHS is very much in hock to a set of values which are inimical to Christianity? And as you say, they embrace diversity, but the one thing they are unwilling to embrace in the mood of diversity is the foundational religion of this state, namely Christianity.
Yeah, I think that's fair. We've seen it in other cases at the NHS that Christian concern has been a part of, including praying nurses and another nurse who was wearing a crucifix in the theater. Now, health and safety, that is a legitimate reason if it is equally applied, if it's a neutral policy. The argument here is that it's not a neutral policy because exemptions were being given left, right, and center. So she was really just being picked on in a sense, and then that's the accusation being made, that there was a level of harassment that goes to the point of illegality.
Roger, in a spirit of Christian openness, I want you to put the case for Croydon if you can. They're not here to make it for themselves, but you must have listened to what they've said. They must have an argument.
Their argument is that it is a safety issue, that a cross or any necklace can carry infection. Now, hospitals under the Equality Act or under the Human Rights Act can say that there's a legitimate reason to keep it out of the theater. But that being said, 18 years she's worn that cross. It's never come off. It's never caused an infection. And there's, again, exemptions being handed out to others. So you can't say it's a health and safety issue if there's any exemptions for anyone else. So that's the case in a nutshell.
Roger Kiska from the Christian Legal Centre. Roger, really appreciate your time. Thanks a lot.